Hi, everyone. Thanks so much for joining us today and making time for our webinar. My name is Jazz, and with me I have Brian, and he will be leading us through a very exciting session today, all about preparing for a records management future with AI, talking about what's happening now and looking at as well what's happening next and in the future.
Great. Thanks, Jazz, for the introduction and welcome everyone. We have a pretty full house today. This is a really exciting topic, I think, for people. Something that feels like it's filling a gap for where people are at on their AI journey and thinking about how this world of AI is going to impact the world of compliance and records management. Just to give you an introduction to myself, my name is Brian Edwards. I am the Director of Artificial Intelligence here at Gravity Union. I have had 30 or so years experience at this intersection where technology meets humans, building long ago intranets and corporate solutions that help people share and collaborate. 25 years of experience in that document and records management space. I'd like to think of myself as a thoughtful technology disruptor. So someone who really cares about that end user experience and what humans are going to go through when we use technology, but I'm also very excited about what technology can do for us. And that's certainly where we're at with AI right now. I am a personal coach, a trainer. I think part of what I love to do is take complex ideas and help people understand them. And I also am a concerned citizen of AI. I've started a blog, which I'll talk about through this in this presentation a couple times, that is about helping us, the individuals, the humans of the world, make better decisions around how we leverage and use AI. And so this is just a little bit about me. I am here with Gravity Union because we care deeply about helping organizations be productive and be and work easily together. But we also care about compliance and records, and we don't think those two things need to sit at opposite sides of a continuum. They can be something that you can achieve hand in hand. And certainly, as we move into this role of AI, considering compliance is a really important thing to do. And yeah, that's what this presentation is about today. What we'll cover is we're going to set the foundations for what that current AI environment is. And what I'll do is start really at the bottom quickly, though, going through just some key terminology just to get us all on the same page. Then at the end of that, we'll start creating a compliance view of this. What does it mean to be compliant and have good record keeping in this new age? Through the lens of AI, we're going to discuss what's possible now with AI and what that near future holds for us, and also give you some real practical ways that you can prepare and move forward on this. The genesis of this presentation really came from this place of tensions that I have experienced as I've talked to technology leaders and records managers. And those tensions seem to create these dichotomies, these pools. Records managers have been pulled into conversations because IT wants to move forward on, let's say, launching Copilot and getting that out. But there's concerns that that would expose oversharing, or that the content isn't in an order that would make Copilot really give effective or useful results, or expose something worse. There's this tension between AI suspicion. Some folks out there really don't understand or believe or are suspicious about the momentum around AI, or what we as a society really should be leveraging it for. And then there's these others who are overstating it and think that it's already going to do every single thing that it needs to for you without having humans involved. And again, these kind of dichotomies getting created. There's this perceived AI momentum. You would think that everyone is already 100% invested. And then there's this actual AI momentum where quite a lot of people are still at the really early stages of figuring out what to do about it. There's this oversimplification in some areas where we're making it seem like it's actually really easy. And then in other areas, it's got a lot of over complexity where it's not actually super helpful, because it's just making us have to spend a lot of time actually preparing and building things that aren't necessarily having the return that we need them to have. And then lastly, and hopefully we can move, this maybe is a dichotomy, a real one, our AI readiness and the AI avoidance. Hopefully we're all moving more towards readiness, because it is happening. The world's moving towards leveraging AI. But these tensions really brought in, I think, for me, a view of, well, how can we help people move forward for this safely, and maybe think of these less as tensions that are against each other, and try to find a place where there's harmony in the middle. How do we bridge that bridge between records management and IT, advance on leveraging AI, but while we're also doing it, make ourselves compliant as organizations. So, Jazz, I'm going to have you put up a poll for this one. I'd love to just get a feel for those that are in the webinar right now, or where you are on your AI journey. Just sort of get a sense of what's happening right now for you. And I think you could select more than one at a time. So,
Yes.
yes, yeah. So if more than one of these apply to you, then it would be great to have you put that up. I don't have a poll, see a poll, but maybe that's just me. Jazz is
I
maybe
see
I'll have
12
you.
responses. Some
Awesome,
people
cool.
are
Okay,
responding. We are
cool.
getting some initial numbers back. It looks like our
Excellent.
top concern is the first one. We're working on AI values and policies.
Excellent, great.
And the second in second
As
place is the last one.
okay, we're implementing new records management tools that have AI built in, like Purview. So there's this tactical part where we're actually already implementing tools to help us manage both AI as well as use AI to manage the things we've always managed. And then there's this really early stage, kind of still figuring out what our values and policies are as as an important part. These other ones here, focusing on cleaning up our content, we're hearing from a lot of records managers, they're getting more and more anxious as well as push to help the organization clean up its mess. So things like eliminating rot, helping secure things more properly, or maybe going back to the very early beginnings of trying to understand whether or not things are properly organized so that AI can leverage it. There's lots of folks out there that are starting to implement small little experiments in AI with Copilot and other things. And certainly we hear a lot of folks concerned about oversharing, but Jazz, has any of that changed since I've been talking through this slide?
I'm just
Still,
looking through. Yeah, the first one's still in top place. And well, I'd say the last two are almost tied.
okay, yeah,
Yeah.
oversharing. That's understandable of the crowd that's on the call today. So let's start with the vocabulary around AI, get on the same page about this. I'll try to mention why these are important to people who are in the records management space, or document custodians or guardians, or people who are just sort of power users of content. When we think of the definition of the word AI, I like this one, the theory and development of computer systems to act on tasks that typically require human intelligence, partly because it just makes it really simple to think of. Yeah, the purpose of AI is to slowly find those places where humans used to do things, but now we can automate those. And oftentimes those are in places where humans really don't love being involved in the first place. They're very tactical, boring tasks often. At least those are the things we're starting to automate in the early stages here with AI. As AI advances, it's of course going to step into more thorough or bigger roles of doing what humans do, but that's where we're at right now. Models are really important. They're kind of a major part of the uh, uh, system that is AI. And model is like the brain part of the human. And so they're typically very data driven. They're trained on a bunch of information. All models have different kind of strategies around training. So some models are trained very specifically on a particular type of data. The ones that we're familiar with, like OpenAI's model and Copilot, are trained on a very wide variety. And that's pretty typical for those models because they're large language models. They're algorithmic. They actually are mostly probabilistic. So what that means is that they are fairly predictable. If someone asks the same question in different places, it'll generally give you a fairly similar answer. There is some creativity built into them, but using probability, they're mostly going to be giving people the same answers. They are autonomous. They can run on their own. They don't need humans pushing buttons. They're purposeful typically, and they have a learning element to them where they can continue to improve over time. What records managers and people in this world need to know about models is they may all have different capabilities and tools around privacy, the security of information, how they train their models, and protection against inappropriate content, as well as how they handle intellectual property. And so this is just a prompt I gave to ChatGPT to kind of get a sense of, those top models out there. What are they doing around data privacy, security measures? You could prompt something very similar if you want, and get a good feel for what's occurring out there in these different tools. But this is something, of course, that I think records managers are going to need to know more and more as they help IT organizations secure themselves and make sure that they're doing things that are complying with regulatory needs and legislation, et cetera. A generative is a type of model. I would call these the troublemakers of AI because they create new content, and there's a bunch of things we have to pay attention to there. They can lie, or we call hallucinate, tell us something that we think is true. They tend to be fairly biased towards what we ask it. So if we say, tell me why we should keep all our files in OneDrive, it'll give us a bunch of reasons why, which isn't necessarily a good idea. And so they can be troublemakers also because we haven't figured out completely how to manage that content, what we own, what we don't own. There's lots of stuff still being figured out in the world around generative models. One of the models out there that's similar, or that's advancing alongside those generative models, is a reasoning model. So this is where we're taking information or content, and we're actually leveraging sort of typical human brain style activities of reasoning, and whether it be sort of branch chain analysis or weighing probability and then coming up with conclusions based on that. This is going to be more and more useful as we move towards models that help us make decisions, or decision models. It's going to be, as we play out more and more in rolling this into organizations, something records managers will have to pay attention to for how these models work and what's traceable in the way that they reason. Copilot is not a model. It's actually just a marketing term that applies to a bunch of things from Microsoft. They have large language sort of chat-driven AI throughout all of their products now, and they've given them all the moniker Copilot. I guess what's important to understand is it's actually not one model underneath the covers. It's a bunch of models, and depending on how you ask the question, Microsoft might send you or use a different model for the type of question that you're asking. So it's sort of a more complex than just being as simplistic to say that it's just one thing. It's actually quite a lot of things. Prompting, a very important part of the AI world. Many of you have probably been told that you have to learn how to prompt better. This is the input that you give an AI system so that you could generate a response. And every model out there likes different kinds of prompting. So I can even ask AI to help me build prompts. And so I want to build a prompt for AI that knows my industry and regulatory oversight and can evaluate my file plan and tell me what's missing. And so AI actually creates the prompt for me. So what do I tell AI to do if I wanted to do the thing that I wanted to do? So if you didn't know that before, you can ask AI to walk you through how to create a good prompt. Agents are an important sort of artifact of AI. It's what we create to play a particular role. So we take a large language model, or we take a big model, and then we break it off into a sort of very specific task. You can kind of think of it as this evolution of a script or a chatbot, which used to be kind of very, very closed into what they can do. Agents can be a lot more sort of flexible and do a lot more now in the age of AI, because there's this more capability built into the AI models. And then lastly, or there's only a couple more here, benchmarks are really important for all organizations because they're how we measure the quality of AI output. And as we move forward, we're probably going to want to start to have mechanisms or ways that we evaluate the quality of AI output so that we can ensure that we're purchasing or using something that is getting us the results that we need, because we're going to be replacing sort of human reasoning in some cases. So if I have a AI tool, for example, that is helping me sort through resumes and giving me the best ones at the end of the day, I do want to know, well, is it doing a good job at that? How do I know it's doing a good job at that? And benchmarks are a way that we do that. And the last thing here, or actually there's two more, is RAG. This is important because it's how we send content to a LLM to get information about our content by leveraging the LLM. So in other words, if I am sending information to a model. I package it up in this thing called a RAG, and the model takes that information and it leverages it in order to give me an answer. And so why that's important for organizations is we have to think about, well, how do I send my content safely to these models? And what content can I send? And so there's a lot to think about in terms of where your content's going, how it's being packaged, and how it moves to the model and then back from the model to you in order to stay secure, in order to make sure that you're not putting information out there that you shouldn't put out there. And the final sort of term in the AI world is explainable AI. So this is, or XAI, this is more of a concept that is about how can we make sure that we can fact check AI or show how it made decisions. So explainable AI is very specifically AI that has capabilities built into it to show you its decision trees or show you how it came up to a conclusion. Much of what we've experienced in the early stages of AI didn't come with this, and so we are just left with something that sounds really good, but we're not sure if we can trust it. So this will continue to be a more important part of how we make sense of the use of AI in organizations and find AI that is more explainable. So let's now take all those terms that we just gave and think of this from a compliance lens. What are we seeing in terms of the capabilities around AI, and how might we view those as sort of records managers or people that have to comply with perhaps regulatory oversight or have to comply with legislation, or simply try and make our companies run effectively and ensure that we're not letting information such as private information flow outside of the company. Jazz, I'm going to just pause here for 1 second. I don't know if you're there. I just wanted to see, is there any questions so far in the presentation, or I will remind people they can ask questions if there are any throughout this.
Yes, feel free to jump in with some questions. I don't see any right now in the
Okay,
Q&A,
perfect.
But again, we can ask questions as we go, and we will address as many as we can. So
Awesome.
yes.
Thanks, Jazz. Sorry, I'm making you jump in mid presentation here. Probably
No problem.
surprised you. So if we think about the compliance forces that AI is impacting, I thought one of the kind of neater ways to think about this is thinking of it from like a content lens or data lens. Our job as records managers is to ensure that that content goes through some sort of predictable life cycle, whether it's content or data. Content could be documents, it could be data, it could be paper documents. And the various parts of that we'll walk through are how is it regulated right now? What are we actually required to comply with? What does that process of creating that content look like? So the early stages that sometimes aren't caught in the records management process, but perhaps should be. There's the classification, which is really important of how that content gets managed throughout its process, or perhaps dealt with when it's done. And the workflows around that, so the approvals or the routing that takes place as we go through that, making that a content more official in our organization. We have this new thing with AI that is, I will call it the assistant. So AI likes to assist us, and it's sort of metadata about the content. It might be by, for example, by providing a summary of the content for us, or providing meeting minutes that it takes on the side, which becomes kind of its own sort of meta content. And then there's the general sort of oversight tools, like how and what should we be doing to look through this. So let's take a look at what the now is through each of these, and what the implications are to AI and compliance in this very moment. So first, we'll start with legislation. I'll say this. Legislation in the US and Canada is really crap right now. It is, there's proposed legislation in Canada. There is like terrible back and forth legislation in the US, partly through two very distinctly different presidential orders in the US. And there is no formal legislation at a federal level. There are many states and even cities coming up with legislation to fill in the gap there. And so the legislative landscape in the US is quite complex, although it's and disjointed. So if you're operating, you have to kind of look at all levels to kind of understand, what do I need to comply with around AI? And it's just not good in this part of the world. I would say the only North Star around legislation is the EU. I think and I'll talk about that in a second. The reason for this is, we started to do something new and it's probably damaging. So maybe we were pillaging trees or finding gold in the ground and dumping our chemicals into the local rivers, or we were whatever we were doing. Governments then come in and start to help regulate that and set standards around that. That's just generally bad for society. And then companies comply with those standards, and really our jobs become around managing to those standards, or sometimes even better standards than what we're regulated to, such as environmental standards. Right now, though, technology is moving so rapidly, progress is outpacing this sort of traditional guardrail function, like legislation. And in addition, companies themselves really lack the structural know-how. There hasn't been any one part of the organization that owns AI. It's sort of distributed and pushed throughout the company. And so I've seen that it really comes down to the individuals and organizations that are left to pick up the pieces. That includes everyone on this call right now. I did start a blog called All of Us Humans, or a newsletter, because I felt like this was something we should be talking about. And if I could share any tools to help people who are in those decision-making roles make better decisions around, risk, ethics, governance, I felt like we really have to do that ahead of legislation telling us we need to. I mentioned that the best attempted regulation is the EU's AI Act, and I'd say if you were trying to be a good citizen, I'd read that act and really understand what it is that it's trying to do and how it's trying to do it, and it could be instructive for things that you might want to do as an organization. If I were to just really briefly cover what I think are the major risks in AI, I would say it is certainly privacy, this personal and enterprise information that may flow out of the organization. And what is AI doing with that? Is it permanently being stored anywhere else? Is it leaving the borders of the countries it's supposed to stay in? So it's something to be watching. Close to that is data leakage. So it's not just personal information, but it could also be core corporate content or data. It could be customer information. Intellectual property. Both, this is a really important one for me personally, both from an infringement standpoint. Most of the models we use have been trained on things that probably were intellectual property, and it is still unclear as to whether or not that was an acceptable use of the content. So there's many, many lawsuits around that. And then as you get results from AI, because it creates things, do you have ownership on that? That's also very unclear, and the world is still trying to figure that out. So managing, understanding what you own, what's yours, as well as trying not to infringe on intellectual property are really important parts of this journey. Trustworthiness and hallucination are really critical things to pay attention to and ensure that we're minimizing in organizations. Traceability and explainability, I mentioned, is an increasingly important thing, especially when those decisions are impacting something critical, like such as, let's say, medical AI that is perhaps aiding in a patient care scenario, or anything really that sort of has a constituent that it touches at a human level. Oversharing, we all mentioned, is a really important one. So AI has this tendency to be able to look places that we don't know we can look. And by doing so, it sometimes exposes weak security, and that's what oversharing concerns mean. And then inappropriate content. So we've seen AI be able to be shaped both by prompting, improper prompting, as well as just intentionally bad act. And so it also is possible that you could back inappropriate content. So how do we make sure that that doesn't happen for people and make them vulnerable to that? Where I've seen
I'm just gonna
sure.
pop up again.
Yeah.
We have a question which is relevant
Awesome.
to that current AI risk,
Awesome.
so I thought
Perfect.
I'd
Great.
jump in.
Yeah,
The
I love
question
it.
is, do you have any suggestions on how to introduce AI internally and address some of the fears around losing their jobs to AI?
It's a really interesting question. Yeah. So I think when I'm out there talking, I absolutely hear the fear that people have around the displacement we're going to see in the future around jobs. And I'll be real, that I think there is a reality that AI will replace parts of our jobs. It's early use, and I would say its current use is going to help enable us to be, I would say, is more superhuman workers or superpowered workers. And so instead of running away from AI right now, I feel like the most important thing we do is we lean in a little bit to learn what are those kind of superhuman or really superpowered qualities that are going to make us continue to be really useful in our jobs. And so I would say, just more broadly, I'm kind of talking slightly philosophically here, the risk of job displacement is real. However, it's probably not going to take place significantly or immediately until AI continues to improve over time. And so in the near term, what I would say is we all need to take the call to action to implementing or trying or leveraging AI in our own jobs and see how and learn that way so that we can continue to be valuable in this journey. I I would say, and so that's a philosophical viewpoint. I would say, as we mature, organizations really are going to have to think about their relationship to the communities that they're part of and the communities that they own. I think that like the long-term risk can be we create these big, vast areas that become kind of coal mine towns that where we close down the coal mine, except instead of coal miners, it's analysts or people whose jobs have been replaced by AI. And so it's going to be up to society to really, really lean in on this one and find the right ways to govern that, whether it be through slowly introduction of AI and or helping retool people through this journey. These are I will say this, I don't have anything specific to offer in terms of an immediate thing you could do. However, I would say these are the exact topics I cover on the blog. There's an area at the very top of all of us humans called risk and ethics resources. And there's many, many, many articles sort of inside of that cover this particular topic. Jazz, who's my host here today, introduced me to some of the content that a really great HR leader, kind of researcher, Josh Bersin, did I get his name right, Jazz?
Yes.
Introduced, and he really shares a viewpoint of how we will see AI over time playing a role of superpowering us becoming more and more sort of actors that control AI, and eventually, in some circumstances, when AI is of high enough quality, replacing humans. But it's I think he creates a really good thinking tool for how organizations might prepare for each of those different stages. I just rambled quite a bit. It's a very interesting topic for me, though. So thanks for asking the question. I'm going to move on.
There's another question, but I will save
sure.
it to the end. And
okay.
Or if you want to do it now,
you can ask it. You can ask it, and I'll tell you whether or not.
Yeah, it's an ethics question. So, do you have any thoughts on the incredible amount of resources that go into powering AI, water, energy for data centers, etc.?
Yeah.
As an
absolutely.
IM person, I'm excited about the possibilities, but yes, also at an organization that really cares about climate change. So lots of concerns.
Yeah, it's a really I love that people are concerned about these things. It's a huge concern, and AI, if you don't know, is massively dependent on large GPU data warehouses or warehouses for compute power in order to perform. And that power is massively damaging to our environment. There are already clawbacks of commitments that folks like Google have made in the world around their ability to meet environmental promises because of the advent of AI. So this is a real concern for sure. I would say the good news is we are also advancing on our ability to be very efficient with AI. I think one of the everyone's probably heard of what happened with DeepSeek, but it was a new LLM that was released in China. And what was so powerful about it, it was using a lot less compute power to kind of get the same accuracy for the same answers. And so there's innovation occurring that is going to address that. And I think we should be really happy about that. And obviously pay attention to that in our purchasing processes. How do we make sure that we're taking advantage of AI that's most efficient? and isn't impacting that environment. And there's also a lot of resources for that on the blog too. So it's a good concern. I do see, just to kind of bridge that to this, I do see records managers, because records managers are people that are in that position, are already tied to being more compliant and helping create that greater regulation. They are stepping in and being part of the conversation around AI, whether it's through creating guidelines or policies, minimizing the risks in the organization, or helping organizations create sort of risk indexes around it. And I think, you could put environmental impact as part of that risk there too. So, but great question. I'm going to move on. So the content obviously is one of the biggest things that AI is impacting the content creation process. The largest AI tools that are the most used out there are all LLMs, which are all generative tools that create content. And that gives us a call towards understanding that content process and really thinking through what do we need to change for regulation or how we think of records. So both on the models and app sides, choosing the right products, making sure that they comply with things like privacy or intellectual property, thinking about prompts and whether or not we want to capture prompts as part of content. And I'll tell you why you might want to do that in 1 second. Thinking about how we generate new content, so reports, drafts, policies, they're all being created by AI. And so the creator, if you will, is no longer the human, it's actually a computer. And that has implications to how we attribute content inside of our storage. And then we're also getting advice from AI, whether it's replacing a lawyer or an architect or a policy person or a researcher. And so how do we make sense of that advice and whether or not do we need to trace or have any accountability towards its accuracy or how good it is? And so, AI is being used to draft policies. Here's a prompt. Can you draft me an AI policy? And so, yeah, you could draft your AI policy using AI. And it probably isn't going to be that bad. You'll notice here it actually, some of the things it says in this policy are really quite useful. But we have to think through, well, now who's accountable for this content? And do we still attribute it to a human? And if so, which I think we should, and if so, what is the role of that human to validate that this is the right thing, versus just trusting AI has kind of covered what it needed to cover. There's also implications. I talked about intellectual property. So far, it looks like legislatively, from a copyright perspective, you don't actually own the output of something that a generative model creates. You own the prompt that you used to create it. So here you have a Siamese cat sitting at a desk, not wanting to file his paperwork. You don't own the picture that it creates, which I think is actually quite funny. So the record creeping questions here for content are prompts records? And do you own that content created by AI? Who's attributed as the author to that generated content? And really, ultimately, where does accountability lie in AI generated content? And how can we ensure that we're using AI with humans and that they maintain that oversight or that accountability for what they're leveraging it for? As we think through the further stages of AI, we have the classification. This is probably an important one to anyone who's spent a lot of time putting things in file cabinets. I think every record manager's dream is that AI is just going to help find content, auto-classify it, and tell me when I need to get rid of it. That's just not the reality at all right now, but it is something that I think I've heard people think that it should be able to do. And there's good news about this. Jazz, my host here today, wrote a great article around the SharePoint metadata hero called autofill. This is a feature in SharePoint. It's a kind of pay-per-use feature that allows you to have fields in your SharePoint lists, such as metadata fields that are leveraging something within the documents and autofill them for you. So whether it's sort of invoice numbers or maybe contract deadline dates or things that AI can look into that document and find, it can auto-populate those for you through this feature. And that's great because, a lot of, as we think about the role of records managers, it's fixing the things that humans do wrong. And so this is kind of helping with something that already wasn't going that well. And some other good news, as we think about sensitivity labels or how we're thinking about compliance, we are leveraging AI, such as auto labeling for that. And there's lots of capabilities out there to go and crawl content, look for patterns or match what AI determines to be something kind of important, and then do something with that content, such as applying a label or flagging it in a report. So there is a lot of auto classification kind of going on out there. The reality around this, though, is that it still relies on contextual indicators, usage and user mapping, lexicon references inside the content, the semantic meaning and security. All of these, if you will, are just traditionally the things that records managers really care about. It's how we create good systems. And so I think the good news is that records managers and IT leaders can agree on more than they know, because if IT leaders are wanting to take advantage of AI and want it to be powerful for the organization, I think the goals are the same. I produce this newspaper by AI prompt. And what I mean by that is, if we think about how AI works, let's take a Copilot prompt, and I think some people think that the LLM just takes that prompt and then answers. That's not actually how it works. It's actually very complex, but I will just sort of break this down for you. You make a prompt through Copilot, and then the graph is used to look for context. And the graph is something that's an index of relationships of information. So in order for the graph to actually find the right content, it has to have a good index of relationships. And that means that that information has to be stored properly, marked properly, secured properly. That's how the graph works to find content. The graph then uses that semantic index that it's created and finds potential content that it can send to the LLM. The LLM, so the graph actually depends on the security. It makes sure that I have access to the things that are probably helpful in answering the question. And then it sends that along, first processing that content by making it something the LLM can read. And then the LLM makes sure that the content that it was asked is appropriate. So I'm not asking for passwords, for example. And then it responds with an answer. Copilot reviews that response. It looks at all of your compliance and Purview settings to determine whether or not you actually should be getting this content back. And then it gives the allowed response to the end user. So there's a lot going on there, but I guess the foundation of it that I'd like to just reinforce is a lot of it really depends on having good content and good security. And both record managers and IT managers should care about that. Good design, thoughtful information architectures, great security practices, using document templating and content types to help drive a similarity between documents, effective metadata that helps create those indices, and really distinguishing personal files versus records is going to help you have a better experience with AI. Of course, and eliminating rot or the content that's you don't want to show out somewhere. As we move forward into the workflow, I don't have a ton to say about this other than agentic AI is already starting to act as part of that sort of routing engine for content. So whether it's moving things through approvals or auto approving, there's a lot of auto approval out there already around, hey, I looked at this request, it comes under a threshold of $500, I'm going to auto send it along and not necessarily get a manager's approval on it. Where the implications of that are that we're trusting the AI to make the right decisions around those approval processes. So there's certainly a place for people in this role, the RM space or compliance space, need to think about how they know AI is making good decisions about that. So everything from routing content, escalating content, and then even down at the task level, you might have AI help reset a password for someone. How does that process that doesn't involve a human get vetted so that we make sure that it's making the right decisions, that this person is the right person to change that password? How do we capture AI's use in the process? How do we validate AI systems and are accurate and fit for the job? And also, what's the role of a records manager for benchmarking performance? We're going to want these things to be fairly accurate and predictable. I think there isn't many people out there right now that I think are talking about benchmarking as a tool within an organization or as a mechanism for assessing system performance. I think that's potentially one of the sort of roles of the compliance function. As we move around the content, we are getting a lot of assistance with AI. So AI summarizes things for us, whether it's meeting minutes or content summaries. So we sit in meetings and then we trust that AI took good meeting minutes. It answers questions for us like the policy chatbot. So instead of actually reading the policy, we might actually take a motion or a movement based on the chatbot's answers. It decodes things. So sometimes it can use more plain language. You see this a lot in the medical field where it's like, I have no idea what this report says. Can you describe what I'm reading? And so decoding it inside it has a lot of room for error. Is it decoding it properly or in a way that is keeping the same meaning? And then there's advising where it's this places where we're replacing experts with AI-enabled expertise, such as I hear a lot of customers, for example, using Copilot to compare contracts, like 1 year to the next, like what's different in this and what should I know, which is awesome because those people would never have called a lawyer for that in the first place. So we're getting something better than we had, but there's implications in that for sure. So thinking about, how should record keepers respond? We want to help content creators minimize those risks related to AI content. So being involved in that bigger, larger part of that content creation process, or stepping in and not just taking things when perhaps we call them a record, but maybe being involved a bit more in the whole lifecycle management of content, or at least understanding what's happening in that lifecycle. Considering your engagement in the AI tool selection and evaluation, thinking about it from a compliance lens and a future record keeping lens, and how these tools are going to help you stay within the boundaries of the regulation you need to follow. Providing clarity on the human-centered accountabilities inside of it. So helping make sure that if something is created by AI, that there's still a human at the end of that is going to take accountable for that transaction. And certainly keeping up to date with legislation. It's quickly changing. If you're in the US, I'm sorry, it's kind of messy there. But it's, California is a great example of a state that has some pretty robust legislation around AI that has to be followed. And it actually has punitive aspects to it too that I think are important to keep track of. I can say in this space too, as assistants, one positive is that you could start to use AI as the judge for AI. So we'll see this more and more, I believe, as we move forward. So for example, I used Copilot to write an IT security policy, and then I went to ChatGPT and I said, hey, what do you think of this security policy? I fascinatingly found that it found things in the initial policy that it didn't think were sound, such as there is a current thinking that we shouldn't make people change their passwords all the time. It's actually less safe. And that's a more modern view of password changes for a policy. Copilot didn't know that. It actually required regular changes. And then the ChatGPT policy, probably because it's founded on, it was founded in more current context, knew that wasn't a good policy. So I think you'll see this as we move forward. AI, monitoring AI, there is actually very, very specifically models out there that are meant to judge. And as we move forward in the world, I think those models are going to become a bigger part of how we monitor AI and make sure that it's returning the things we need it to return. And then lastly, the oversight is the thing that we all really care about. How do I actually know what's happening in my organization and keep track of all this? One place we start is just really thinking about this from a values and principles perspective. I know when I first started here at Gravity Union, it was really clear to me that one, very similar to the comment that was made or the question that was asked earlier around our jobs is, well, how do I know we're not just going to replace our jobs? That concerns me. I don't want to participate if it means I'm just trying to work myself out of a job. But even more so, there was a concern about we might give up something that's really important to us. So we really value that human connection and being able to spend time with customers. And part of the change process for us when we're helping people be successful with the stuff we build is really being in front of clients, learning about them, hearing them in person. And we had concerns, or there were concerns around not wanting to skip that or to use AI to interview people, or places where we could use AI, but it would ultimately contravene our values. And so we came up with a series of principles that are just sort of guide where we put our attention. And I think these are useful for every organization to think through, especially with the idea that we all want to advance, we all want to move forward. AI is not going to go away. What do we want? What's most important to our organization to ensure we don't disrupt or ensure stays important and valuable for us? And so for us, really AI that helps us spend more time with connection and less clutter, AI that helps us really continue the craftsmanship type things we do in our work. So anything that's in that process that helps us improve quality or make sure that we're consistently delivering quality. And also AI that differentiates us. There's a lot in the world right now you can hear or read about AI being a race to the bottom, because if I can do something with AI, so can everyone else. And so trying to find AI that really is very specifically making us unique and keeping us unique. On the governance front, I would suggest you all get familiar with some of the tools out there. The two that I have links here to, the Artificial Intelligence Risk Management Framework actually comes from the US. It is from the Commerce Department, and it is, as far as I know, one of kind of the more robust AI frameworks for organizations to look at or leverage when thinking about that compliance strategy. And I think it's pretty comprehensive. Also here, I'm putting the Government AI Coalition from the city of San Jose, which is actually the city of San Jose and a bunch of other cities who came together and created a foundation or a template for ongoing AI governance. And there's tools, there's draft policies and guidelines inside of there. There's just a bunch of content there that I think people who are considering governance should take a look at. Microsoft also has this website that's available for helping organizations be more thoughtful around how they leverage AI, and this thing called responsible AI. Just to put it out there, there is actually quite a bit of content here around the environmental impact of AI and what Microsoft's doing to minimize that. So I think that's interesting. Might be something for those that are thinking about leveraging it and knowing that it might impact the environment, ways to monitor that and reduce that potential impact. And then there's just a bunch of content tools for Microsoft, such as the oversharing reports that come with, if you purchase one Copilot license, you get this thing called Microsoft SAM, which is a way of managing security access across SharePoint. And one of the things it has in it is an oversharing report. So you can get insight into where you might, what content might not be properly managed or properly secured. And you can start to clean things up before you enable AI. There's also a blueprint, Microsoft's oversharing blueprint, which is around if you are concerned around AI, how can you do this safely and in a slow, methodical manner? So there's leveraging the blueprint. If you're super concerned, would be a good idea. We can help you do that. And then all of the other tooling for Microsoft. It sounds like a lot of you are already in this world of Purview, data loss prevention, setting up probably records retention policies and that in the organization. There's so much in that package of Purview to explore. I mentioned down below there is the SharePoint SAM also as a tool to use, as well as Copilot and agent monitoring are also available. So there's tools to look at how people are using Copilot, what they're using it for. You can create very specific traceability around specific agents. So if you're concerned that people might be sending the information out of your organization they shouldn't, you can monitor that as well as report on that. And there's third-party tools such as Orchestry. So Orchestry helps you kind of look for content sprawl. They do a lot of that sort of SharePoint governance toolkit, so that you're setting yourself up properly for good AI use. I would say maybe sort of ironically lean on AI a little bit for quality. You can use it. For example, here's a picture of creating a file plan that's in a Purview format. And I actually thought it, without knowing anything about our company, did an interesting job at coming up with some potential categories that would relate to our particular industry. So I think leveraging AI in this journey is really interesting. The other way you can leverage AI is for things like deep research. One of the articles I wrote was about this crazy world of privacy. There are in the EU's AI Act very interesting constraints around what you can do with, let's say, voice or video for customers or people, and for getting approvals and ensuring that you're not doing it without permission. There's pretty strict things built into the act around that, and I just wanted to kind of get a landscape of like, well, how, what is this like in the US and Canada? Do we have the same things? What do we have? And so I used deep research, and it came out with a very comprehensive report around all of the different law on that topic. I would say, as parting final thoughts to the presentation today, certainly embrace the AI opportunity. Your early RM activities are going to be staying on top of that regulation and law. Leverage AI for classification and sorting. I'd say try to get it into those lower use cases, because it's certainly a place where you'll see how AI can help improve your life. You could also try using Copilot and other AI tools for identifying rot. For example, there's a thing called SharePoint agents that are in every single library. Basically, their Copilot looks into that library and answers questions about the content. One of the things you could ask it, for example, is show me documents that are similar to each other, or documents that maybe look like they've replaced the other. And so you can use it for kind of more nuanced rot type activities. Begin your content discovery, the good and the bad, by using tools that we've discussed today, and then exploring those research capabilities to dig into those unclear areas for your own organization. If you're wanting help, I'm just going to put it out there shamelessly. We can help build that values and governance base for you, whether it's at the really early principles side, or it's further down where you're thinking about the tools and implementing a Microsoft technology to help you govern, or it's rolling things out, making sure that you're turning on those proper reports. We could help you bridge the dreams of records managers and IT by allowing you to see the shared goals inside of your world, or help you build that AI roadmap so you know how to step into this world with thoughtfulness, and you're using early experimentation to learn from, and then kind of continually revisiting that governance approach over time. That assessment and governance piece of it, of course, is a huge piece of this. It's a big part of what we do as an organization, is just helping people on that compliance side. So whether it's implementing Purview or something more tactical, we can help you there. And of course, cleaning up your content mess. So that's what we're good at. So as we finish the presentation, and we have 2 more slides, I did want to pause here just to kind of get a sense, if you've heard this today, and now really what actually feels like a early next step to you. Hopefully one of these covers where you think you're at. Maybe you have something else you can put into the questions, but where are you? Where do you think is your next step? It sounds like there was a lot in that early focusing on that shared values and governance. I'm curious if that's still, after this presentation, the right thing to focus on.
I just launched the poll, so people should see it.
Perfect.
And I do have a couple questions, though. So if we have 2 minutes, maybe you can talk to these questions. The first one is, if we use AI, do we need to indicate it? For example, this policy was creating with the use of AI.
Yeah, and I think every organization has to come up to their what's required for them. I would say it's absolutely a important disclosure and transparency to create a let's not call it a rule, but a guideline around making sure people know when AI was used. I'd say my only feedback on that is that when things say that they were created by AI, I think we naturally distrust them more. And so, finding a healthy way to describe, maybe that is the case, and you definitely want to say, yes, AI created this, but you might want to find something that's sort of in the middle of the road that also indicates a human was involved. And so it's like collaborated with the use of AI, or AI was leveraged in the creation of this content. Some subtler ways to just show that a human was still involved, but AI was there in the background. But absolutely, I would say also just getting agreement from the teams that you're on, or in the entire company, to just be really transparent about when you used AI for something before other people ask, because we're starting to see this wave of people leveraging AI, but then not really being super transparent about that. And it just leaves everyone else in this quandary of like, well, I think this person used AI for this. And so if we can just get really used to, it's okay to use AI, it's fine. I mean, it should be used in places where, we're trying to pull content together, and it generally often does a really good job at that. We just want to be transparent with it. That was a
Right.
long-winded answer.
That's great. One last question for you, squeeze it in. Okay, so do you think that good AI models can be trained entirely on existing electronic information, or do you think that we will need to ingest all of our old physical records in order to have a fully functional agent? Or is it
Yeah.
case by
Oh,
case?
yeah. I think that's going to be a case by case one. It's a really interesting question. I will say this, because the word ingest is a curious one. Models in general don't have any of our corporate content in them. They are taught on more broadly a bigger outside set of content. The way our content then gets put in there and consumed is this process called the RAG, and and whether it's your documents, like documents that you have that are physical or not physical, or whether it's data, there is an entire process around that, what we call the data pipeline for getting content to a large language model or to AI. That is, it really is, that data pipeline is really almost at the heart of this question. It's about, is this the content that's going to help us make better decisions? And so if you have paper records and things that don't have that, then that could help you ultimately, the AI, make more informed and better decisions. I would say yes, it will be. And it's thinking through that data pipeline and what you need to pull together in order to provide it to an LLM or to a model so that it can then derive more meaning from that content. I hope that answers the question.
Yes, great. Thank you. Okay, so I think we will have to wrap it
You're
up
good.
now. If you have any other questions, you can email Brian. I think he has an email address on screen. Oh, our contact at gravityunion.com. We will respond there the quickest. Of course, we're on LinkedIn and all the other channels too. And we do have, my last quick reminder, we do have another webinar coming up about going deep into metadata and Canadian standards as well, and records management focused webinar. And so check out our events page and you can sign up for that as well. And that's coming up in June.
Amazing. Thanks, everyone.